Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members. Really appreciate seeing all of you again. And I'll just be very, do you want me to answer questions or?
Yeah, why don't you give us a
Okay.
quick briefing of what
So,
happened?
a lot of people forget that, by the way, I want to talk just for a second about the media because people forget that I used to be a reporter back in the day. I'm obviously not anymore, and as the years go past, people forget that I used to do that. And I tell people, because people will call me all the time and they'll say, I just read this in the newspaper and I'm upset with you for, and I'll say, well, you're the same people that call me up and say you don't believe the liberal news media, right? Well, why are you calling me and complaining about something that you read in the news media? Take everything you read in the newspaper with a grain of salt, and then some. And actually throw in lots of grains, because more than likely the truth is out there, but you haven't seen it yet. So anyway, well, that's enough about that. With regard to the legislative session, I have been watching the state legislature for the last 25 years. And the last two legislative sessions stand out as being the most free market oriented legislative sessions I've ever seen. Now, people will complain about this and that about the legislature. Believe me, I have many, many complaints about what our legislature does and doesn't do. But by and large, the 2018 legislative session, the 2019 legislative session were more disposed towards free markets and limited government than anything I have seen. And I just want to tell you that because the last time I was up here, I was at the Lincoln Day, and somebody, I can't remember who, maybe somebody in this room, came up to me and said, well, you know, your freedom index used to be really worth something, but now it's not. And I said, well, why do you say that? Well, because the freedom index used to show such lousy scores, and you softened your approach to the legislation. And actually, the truth is, we really haven't. We use the exact same metrics that we've always used. There are 12 different items. We look at every single bill the same way. Does it increase government? Does it add a new regulation, a new program, new agency? You know, all these different things that we've always looked at legislation through the same lens. But what's happened is, one, we got better legislators. That's a reality. We have better legislation. And there's more really terrible stuff that fails. There used to be, you could bring a corporate welfare bill and it would fly through that building so fast you'd barely be able to have time to look at it. And now, the last 3 corporate welfare bills that have come through the legislature have just died. There was even one that was supposed to give a special tax break to first-time homebuyers. And you know, if you're like, oh, that's great, first-time homebuyers. No, it's not. Because that means you're giving an advantage to people in the economy, and you're saying to folks that choose to rent, or people who have owned homes for years, that they're supposed to pay a higher effective tax rate, and that's kind of silly. What it was a giveaway to the realtors. That's basically what it was. But they couldn't even get their bill past the first stage, which was pretty impressive. So that's a testament to the fact that the legislature has moved more right of center. And the very worst bill that passed this last legislative session, I mean, it was not great, but it wasn't all that bad either. It was a bill that created a board that's supposed to examine why mothers die during childbirth, of which there's been very, very few, but it's enough to where we've got to put together a committee and the government needs to be involved in for some reason. I don't know. But it was a very, very minor thing. The very best bill that passed was a bill that allowed for pharmacists from other states to be able to operate in Idaho without having to go through a big bureaucratic mess and big bureaucratic maze to get there. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then on top of that, we also added work requirements for Medicaid expansion. Now, I really wanted Medicaid expansion to be repealed, and I'll just tell you why. I've watched this. This is a problem, folks, that's going to come home to roost, and it's going to come home to roost pretty darn quick. Fact is that 20 years ago, Medicaid was about 17% of the state budget. Today, it's about 30%. And that doesn't even include the new Medicaid expansion population, which, by the way, all the projections for Medicaid expansion were based on an economy that stays about the way it is for the next 10 years. So as long, we're going to be just fine, everything's going to be okay, as long as unemployment remains below 3% for 10 years. That's a problem, and people aren't talking about that. So when you ask questions like, why don't we have money for infrastructure, for roads and bridges and various things like that, there's a reason. It's all going into these big entitlement programs that we can barely afford. And of course, you know that the federal deficit certainly can't handle it. Our national debt is $22 trillion. So there are bright spots, there are not so bright spots, but ultimately, and if you're members of Idaho Freedom Foundation, if you're not, you need to be, we can certainly use your help. But if you look at the stats in your newsletter that you'll get from us, you will see that the numbers are really reflecting a trend line in the right direction. The one place where we're having problems, however, is the budget. The state of Idaho, our government spends too darn much. And this year we launched something called the Idaho Spending Index. And it's kind of working the way the Freedom Index started, where 5 out of 105 legislators in 2012 were supporting free markets, and today it's about 77 out of 105 legislators, more or less, are supporting free markets. On the spending index, it's bad. There's what, you may know the numbers, Ron, it's what, 10 out of 105 legislators are supporting limited spending.
Yeah, I don't actually know the numbers.
It's really bad. It's pretty awful. But that's another place that we're going to work. But I really think, like I said, we made a lot of headway this last legislative session. We have a great new legislator from this area. I'm glad to have on board. He's doing fantastic work, I would say. Would you say?
If you say so.
I only know the numbers tell me. Anyway, I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have. Yes, sir. Except for yours.
2 questions. Do you think we'll get the grocery tax repealed anytime soon with Governor Middleton in power? And the second one is, looked like I saw Utah faced with the same dilemma that we had with the voter initiative. They were able to curtail it to only those below 100% on the FPL. So we didn't duplicate coverage. We've got a 38% duplication on our coverage with Medicaid expansion. Any way you think we can get that scraped away?
Good questions. Grocery tax, I mean, I was suggesting we can get it done this year, but again, we spend too much, and that's really our problem. Until we get spending under control, it's always going to be one of those things. And in fact, I think there's a really good possibility you're going to see in the next couple of months just how bad our spending is, because our revenues are going to be, you'll know, around May 1st or May 2nd, and you'll see that our revenues didn't quite come in the way they were forecast, which is going to bleed over into the next legislative session, and then no, you won't be able to get rid of the grocery tax, at least in 2020. I hope we can, but again, it's a spending problem. We don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem here in Idaho. In regard to Medicaid expansion, boy, I tell you, just getting work requirements was a really tough slog. The legislators in the room will tell you that there was a lot of fighting over it. There were Republican legislators that said, we'll do work requirements. How about voluntary work requirements? That means, I really don't, that's not more. But yeah, so it was really difficult just to get that. Being able to do more than that is going to be really challenging until we start getting real about just how much Medicaid is costing the state. We simply can't afford it. At some point, we're going to have to really put not just sideboards on, but we're going to have to put giant walls. We're going to build a giant, magnificent wall all around Medicaid so it doesn't continue growing and eating up the rest of the budget. We're going to have to. It's just a matter of time. Yes, sir.
Hi, Wayne.
Good to see you.
I was reading that spending index, and could you explain why about the bottom dozen, the biggest spenders, were all Republicans?
Yeah. You know, there's a culture problem in our state legislature. Some legislators believe, why this is this way, and it has been the last 25 years, I don't know, that if the budget committee says that you're supposed to spend X amount of money, then by golly, that's what we're supposed to spend. They know, they've read the budget, we don't know because we're in our other committees, so we'll just go ahead with what you will see. Some legislators, particularly at the bottom of the spending index, never vote against a single budget bill. However, there's really good news. There were some really defining bills being voted on as budgets on the floor of the House. More no votes than I'd ever seen, for example, the Hispanic Commission. Out of 70 votes, got about 28 no votes, I think. Do you remember? That was about 28 no votes, which I thought was great. And that was the most that the Hispanic no votes, the Hispanic Commission had gotten in as long as I've been watching. It's a pretty big deal because legislators are starting to understand that the Hispanic Commission is kind of racist. We literally have a government agency that says you cannot get ahead if you're Hispanic unless the government works with you. Otherwise, if you're left to your own devices, then you'll never succeed because you're Hispanic. That's what that agency says. And if you think the Hispanic Commission sounds racist, think about what the Commission on Negro Affairs sounds like. We had some of those back in the day. We don't anymore. but it's racism. And our legislature understood that, so we're seeing more and more legislators start to vote no against Hispanic Commission, the Arts Commission, against the Libraries Commission, just all these different agencies that really shouldn't exist, against government programs like the Department of Health and Welfare's decision to start sending government employees to people's houses to help them raise their kids and stuff like that. I mean, so you're starting to see some attrition from that, but it's gonna take a while. And yes, Republicans are just as bad as Democrats in some occasions when it comes to that. Yes, sir.
Idaho already straddles 2 time zones. What is the chance that we could end this insanity of conforming to federal daylight savings time?
You know, it never fails that somebody always asks me that question. I hope they do. I mean, I hate it. I think it's stupid. But this is what happens when you put the government in charge of anything, especially time. Yes, sir.
I got 2 questions, one easy and one not so easy.
Well, he asked about time, so
Right.
go ahead.
So what percentage of the budget does the K-12 plus higher universities consume in Idaho per year?
It's about 2/3.
Right, so between that and Medicaid, not much, is that?
Well, I'm sorry, 2/3 of the state general fund is education. Of the total federal and state and other funds, I think it's about half memory serves. There's not a lot left over.
So here's the more interesting question since you're here. I'd like to know how our legislators that we've all worked hard, stuffed envelopes and walked, everybody around here walked blocks, not me, I'm just kidding. But they did walk a lot of blocks and we did stuff envelopes. How do they compare to other places? So since you're up here and we're all heavily armed, I'd like to know how our legislators did compare to other ones. Since you're, you know, the people who hate you called us the anti-Ada county. So
Right.
I'd like to know how, did we send some people down there? Did we do well? What do you think?
North Idaho is the belle of the ball, the cream of the crop.
Don't
I gotta tell you, that's because I fear for my safety. I actually feel safer here than I do anywhere else. But because, I mean, I gotta tell you, that the people here truly vote like Republicans ought to be voting. And I think part of that is because y'all help keep them accountable. I mean, no, you guys are great on your own, but you also give them space. When I hear all the time, more so than anywhere else, oh, look at Ron Mendive, or look at Vito Barbieri, or do just want to call them and tell them, thank you so much for voting no or for voting yes for limited government. That's pretty cool.
They don't call,
But
by
you
the way.
also know that you're not, what's that? What'd you say?
They don't call, not those people, we don't hear from those people.
Oh.
But we do hear from the other ones.
But listen, but here's the deal. You have town hall meetings, and I used to go to town hall meetings with legislators, and it used to be sort of like the pep squad, you know, where the folks that stuff the envelopes and walk the precincts and all that kind of stuff. Somewhere along the way, folks up here realized, wait a minute, we're not the pep squad, we're the team owners who are crying out loud. And they scored 80 touchdowns for us recently, and that makes a difference. That change the mindset. You guys are in charge. They work for you. And that's really huge. But when you look at a map of Idaho and the legislative districts and the Freedom Index, green is good, yellow is and red is good. And on our map, green is all North Idaho. From the Panhandle down to below Port Wayne. It is a beautiful, beautiful thing. The rest of the state is kind of on yellow, and then you've got sort of pockets in the Magic Valley and Ada County that are all red. So I mean, this is a great, I want to replicate what you're doing here down in southern Idaho, and then we'll have a real winner. So, thank you for all you do, I really appreciate it.